Looking back at 2024 on this channel, I feel so proud of what I managed to achieve. I published my full original top 10 video and went on to make another top 10 video about Sonic games, and I started development and completed 50% of my Metroidvania Sonic fan game, Assura the Glitch. But before I plan out a new year of focus and development for my fan games, I want to try another YouTube video format. I would like to share with you my own 2024 Games of the Year video. However, I need to make it clear that I am one of those gamers who doesn't really seek out many new releases. I mainly replay my favourites and seek out new entries and series that I am already a fan of. In the past, I would be most reluctant to check out something completely new to me, but thanks to another personal achievement from 2024, I have broken that habit. By sticking to a regular schedule that my autistic brain enjoys, I managed to consistently stream 3 times a week, every week. I finally started streaming to Twitch too, and quickly became an affiliate, and now I have a cozy Discord community made up of subscribers and friends. It's thanks to this community that I have tried a wealth of games, both old and new, that I have never played before. I managed to replay a lot of beloved games, but was also introduced to 18 more that I probably would never have checked out on my own if it weren't for the recommendations, and in some cases, generously gifted games on Steam from members of our community. And it's these games that I would like to discuss in this video. And only one of them was actually released in 2024. The rest are games from the past that are completely new to me, just so you know the score. So let's take a look at the games I played in 2024 that most impressed me. And I guess I'll do it in the order that I played them, interspersed by other games I tried but gave up on for one reason or another. Best Sequel: Dark Souls 3. I've already gone into detail about why I love the original Dark Souls in my top 10 games of all time. Since completing it, I have slowly and steadily sought opportunities to play each next game in the Soulsborne series. Dark Souls 2 was a step down in every way from the original, and while I have come to admire the ambition after checking out its troubled development, I have never felt like replaying it. It's clear that Dark Souls 2 was a step down because the game wasn't directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki. He was busy working on Bloodborne. I tried Bloodborne, and while I was impressed by its interconnected level design, I was heavily turned off by its gameplay that needs me to play more aggressively. After all, I consider the original Dark Souls to be a chill game, because I can play most of the game at a careful and patient pace. However, I am glad that I tried Bloodborne before moving on to Dark Souls 3. Many Souls fans consider Dark Souls 3 to be the true sequel to Dark Souls, and in many ways I agree with this sentiment. It was this sentiment that had me excited to finally give this entry a go, and I'm happy to report that it doesn't disappoint. From the get-go, the player movement feels more smooth and natural, with more freedom of movement than the previous games. For example, you can now move when drinking an Estus. It reminds me of the changes going from Monster Hunter 4 to Monster Hunter World. But not only does the player have more movement, so do the bosses. The game's introductory boss teaches that I can no longer cheese bosses through blocking, and requires a more aggressive playstyle that immediately took me back to how it felt to play Bloodborne. Thankfully, this step up in difficulty only really applies to bosses and mini-bosses, and the rest of the game can still be played in my chilled and careful exploratory playstyle adopted from the first game. And the world of Dark Souls 3 is a joy to explore, with enjoyable enemy placement and that interconnected through open and shortcuts level design of the first game that I am so fond of, that make me view the Souls games as 3D Metroidvanias. However, this is one element of Dark Souls 3 that disappoints me. The game's progression is incredibly linear. Very few times is the player offered choice of where to go in the way that Dark Souls 1 does. However, I can't be too disappointed by this. The level design in every area is very solid, with each shortcut being satisfying to unlock. I can't really think of any downsides to Dark Souls 3. My biggest frustration was always the difficulty of the bosses or mini-bosses that blocked progression. But every challenge felt fair and achievable. I just had to get out of my lazier Dark Souls 1 playstyle, and I feel the game does a good job of forcing the player to become more aggressive. I wonder now if I'd vibe more with Bloodborne after replaying Dark Souls 3, 4 times after my initial blind streams. This game consumed 2 months of my 2024, and I'm thankful to have picked it up in the Steam sales. It's not my ideal sequel to Dark Souls 1, but it's a huge improvement over Dark Souls 2 in graphics, gameplay, and lore. And I won't spoil it here in this video if you haven't played it yourself, but the ways in which it connects to Dark Souls 1 might be the definition of pure video game magic. Worst intrusive story. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Time for the first dishonourable mention. And you know what? The gameplay of this is pretty good actually. It is a good enough Souls-like, or to put it more accurately, 3D Metroidvania, and I had a good time with its exploration and combat. However, not only did it feel way too easy to parry in this game, but I was just completely bored by the cutscenes, with their ultra-realistic but ugly character models and intrusive story that didn't motivate me to continue this adventure. And it comes with amazing writing like this. Least amount of vocabulary used in a monologue of the year.
And yet the fire still burns. Hope still burns. The Jedi are not yet lost. We are not yet lost. Kashyyyk is not yet lost.
Least amount of vocabulary used in a monologue of the year. Best official soundtrack, Celeste. Celeste is one of those games I was vaguely aware of due to it being talked about by some channels I follow here on YouTube, so I gave it a go while I had Xbox Games Pass, and fell completely in love with it. It is a simple and easy to pick up and play, but difficult to master challenge platformer, akin to Super Meat Boy. Celeste immediately hooked me with its adorable visuals in combination with its unforgettable soundtrack. The game provides moments of intense difficulty, but it is also very fair as the instant respawns encourage me to keep on trying. Climbing the mountain is always fun and engaging. The level design has been masterfully crafted. The game also has an unexpectedly deep and powerful story. The themes of learning to accept the other side of one's personality and the dreamlike quality of some of this game's levels brought me back to the delightful trip that is Knuckles Chaotix. The whole level that accompanies the music, Resurrections, is now one of my favourite moments in all of gaming. Learning to overcome anxiety and depression, but also to not push yourself too hard, is a relatable story that validates my own personal journey with depression. I also want to mention just how well written the character dialogue of this game is. Whenever the game offered additional dialogue for any character, I was always engaged, feeling like I was listening to real people, and always wanted to read more whenever it was offered to me as a player choice. Celeste is a masterpiece. I haven't really replayed the game much past my initial stream, but I have by far and away gotten the most enjoyment through listening to its OST all year round, and it's pretty incredible. And it's been offered for us to enjoy for free on YouTube by the composer Lena Rain. Surprisingly blandest game of the year, Ori and the Blind Forest. I don't really have any strong feelings towards this one. I just wanted to give it this honourable mention because it's only the best-selling Metroidvania of all time, and it's easy to see why. This could be the most beautiful looking and friendliest Metroidvania on the market. But after completing the game, I wish I could say more positive things about it, and I don't really have much negative to say about it either. Another reason I suspect it's sold more than any other is because it's mostly easy to pick up and play, and is very simple control-wise. Looking back, I feel like this game has a lot in common with Celeste. With the way the platforming challenges are designed, this game is very accessible. But for me, in a Metroidvania, that just bores me. I want to be challenged. The game doesn't really have any boss fights for me to look back on with all. I expect the game's plot is beloved by those who like this game, but for me, the way it's delivered detracted from the experience. The cutscenes are narrated and the player is spoon-fed the context when this game could have easily and confidently gone down the no dialogue route that made early Metroid games memorable. And as I write this segment, I can't think of any music from the game that stuck with me. I'm not saying this game is bad, I remember having a good time with it and enjoying its controls, but I think a lot of the design of this game is very paint by numbers. But I wonder what the addition of another Metroid 2 remake developer, Dr. M64, did to the design of the sequel to this game. Is Will-O-The-Wisps a better game? Best Metroidvania, Castlevania, Symphony of the Night. You may be surprised to learn that even though I am a Metroidvania enthusiast, I had never previously played a Castlevania game, mainly because most Castlevania games aren't actually Metroidvanias, and just a select few, so I didn't really know where to start. That changed when I was asked to react to the opening of Symphony of the Night at the end of one of my live streams. I came away from that reaction pretty impressed by the way the game starts the player with all their abilities before they get stripped away, which was a familiar feeling I enjoyed from the first two Metroid Prime games. I pledged to blind stream it and thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. The game's world is a joy to explore, with very memorable areas and level design. The movement is fun and the world opens up very quickly. The feeling of being lost only becomes frustrating in the latter half of the game, where I wasn't sure on where to go next. The game also seems to have a lot of optional stuff, with several endings to achieve too. The map design and freedom offered feels very reminiscent of Super Metroid. Another area where the game offers the player freedom is the RPG-style combat and gear systems. The standard combat is very in line with what I know traditional Castlevania to be like. Random drops give the player the choice between axes, whips, and other things I recognise from Simon Belmont's Smash Ultimate moveset. But then the game goes deeper with that, with a gear system that makes the game feel like a 2D version of Dark Souls, allowing the player to customise their playthrough by equipping weapons, spells, armour, and rings that are either collected on the map or obtained via random enemy drops. I have only played through the game once, but I can see how one playthrough can be different to another. Sometimes I would find a really cool item, only to die and get sent to the last save and not have that item spawn again, losing it forever. The game is impressive and is an essential play for anybody who likes Metroidvanias. Also worth mentioning is the game's soundtrack, for even though I had never played a Castlevania game before, I somehow knew what the typical Castlevania music was going to be like. And the game does start out the way you'd expect, you know, with music and a haunted and spooky vibe, but as I explored new areas, my expectations for the music were subverted. It started with the music for Marble Gallery, a piece of music that makes me feel like I am lost and confused in an infinitely wide open space. Requiem for the Gods, somehow feeling like a Bowser level theme from a Mario game. Crystal Teardrops with its piano, that somehow reminds me of Sonic Adventure. And the jazzy energy of Wandering Ghosts, that makes me want to get up and dance before walking down a long and lonely road. Now I'm left to wonder, is this the best Castlevania, Metroidvania the series has to offer? Or is there another entry in the series that I should check out? Either way, I'm excited to replay Symphony of the Night again soon. Most disappointing Metroidvania. Hollow Knight. I've been aware of Hollow Knight since it was brought to my attention by the Metroidvania loving YouTubers I am subscribed to, and after it was requested during my Dark Souls 3 streams, I decided to check it out on Xbox Games Pass. Now this is what I enjoyed about the game, the art, and the challenging bosses that felt very fun with the game's movement. Here is what I didn't enjoy about it. Everything else. I gave Hollow Knight the biggest chance. I kept on playing, hoping that enduring its tougher moments would lead to a reward that made all that exploration and combat worth it, but I always felt like I was chasing a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. Looking back at the game, I recall nothing but frustration at how long, difficult and tedious simply navigating this massive game world is. The simple art of movement in a video game does not feel good to execute in this game, unfortunately, which is bizarre, considering I think the bosses feel pretty fun to fight with the way my main character controls. I could go on and on and on about my frustrations with this game, very much in the same way that this game never wanted to end, but after 13 streams of Hollow Knight, I could never learn to love this game. I'm sorry to those of you who adore this game, I get why you do, but this game demands a lot from its players, and I don't think I will ever have the consistent dexterity required to be skillful at this game. Best puzzle game. Portal. I remember being made aware of Portal since the sequel won multiple Game of the Year awards way back when it was first released. As a Nintendo Wii owner, I saw the gameplay and immediately felt jealous that I couldn't play it, and it would remain at the back of my mind for the longest time. It was always the plan to get the Nintendo Switch version and play the games co-op with a friend. This year, that finally came to pass, as both games were kindly gifted to me by my community, albeit on PC. Now, I don't think I can come up with anything that won't have been said before about Portal. The game is obviously a brilliant and polished puzzle game that does a lot with the Portal concept. No wonder this is beloved by many gamers. I would like to personally commend a few things here, starting with the game's level design. This is the first time I have played a Valve game on my own, and it was a joy to see the Valve design firsthand that I had read and heard about from prior sources, such as Kiwi Talks' interviews with Valve developers. I love the way the game teaches via gameplay, and it is clear to me that these games had every inch of them covered by Valve's vigorous playtesting ethics. I love the game's game's physics, especially the gravity. Several puzzles in the game involve creating a lot of momentum, and sometimes you can find yourself infinitely falling through 2 portals and reaching terminal velocity. As a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, my mind was blown to experience the 3D version of how it would feel to be caught in an infinite loop from the 2D games. I also love how the PC version has motion controls when played with my Nintendo Switch Pro controller. This is the first PC game I have played with motion controls, and it was a welcome addition. I simply do not find keyboard and mouse to be comfortable. So as a Nintendo gamer who uses motion controls whenever possible to enhance my aiming and shooters, it felt completely natural. I am excited to play more PC games with this feature. I love the way GLaDOS taunts the player throughout the game, and the final boss was a memorable puzzle that subverted my expectations. And then to be greeted by the song Still Alive during the credits reminded me that I was first exposed to this series way back in 2009 when I started playing Rock Band 2 for the first time, and this song came with the game via free DLC. I also love how the second game has co-op, and while I haven't finished all the content Portal 2 has to offer, I think it's worth mentioning it because it was also a blast to play. And I love what a second portal gun brings to the complexity of puzzles. Getting that aha moment is always satisfying. And when it comes to the game's single-player experience, I certainly wasn't expecting a more involved narrative with playable cutscene set pieces. I will have to return to this game, but I also want to get round to playing more acclaimed Valve games. Worst solutions to puzzles: The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Now I'll be honest with you, when it comes to solutions to puzzles and learning a game's rules, I can be a right stupid plonker sometimes. Like how it took me 20 minutes to realise I could pick up and use the portal gun in Portal's first level. But no game has ever made me feel as stupid as The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. I was excited to try my first 2D Zelda game after being pitched the idea that 2D Zeldas are Metroidvanias too, and I can see how that idea makes sense. But every Metroidvania I have played manages to convey very well what upgrade can bypass a previously encountered obstacle. I feel like this 2D Zelda game gets this so wrong. I know that old 2D Zelda games can be very obscure with their hints, and some people like this, but when I had to consult with chat every single time I couldn't figure out how to progress, I think this is a huge failure on the part of the game designers. I gave up playing quickly, and sadly I will never return to this or its remake. However, I am excited to play Echoes of Wisdom, a 2D Zelda where the player has a lot more freedom in solving the puzzles. Outstanding achievement in game design: The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. If you're the kind of player who likes to mess around and see everything that is possible in the game you are playing, then boy do I have the game for you. Stanley Parable was kindly gifted to me by my community, and I very quickly fell in love with its core concept. What if there was an outcome for every decision the player makes, and what if the player is constantly being backseated by a narrator? I very much sum up the Stanley Parable as playtester, the game. As somebody who is his own fan games level designer, I have to think of everything a player can possibly do and design around that. And as my game's own playtester as well, I have to push the design to its limits and find everything that is possible in the playground I am presented with. This is what you do in this game. The Stanley Parable ingeniously realises this with simple walking simulator gameplay. There only really is player movement and an interact button. But what the game does with that is offer seemingly infinite possibilities with player choice. Every time I thought I had run out of options, I discovered another choice, another route, and another ending. Helping to bring life to this is the hilarious and very well performed narration. This tone and way of addressing the player took me back to the narrator of Dungeon Keeper 2 and provided endless entertainment on what would otherwise be a very boring game. It's pretty staggering how many lines the narrator has, and it's never boring either. I never wanted to skip a line. The Stanley Parable lures me in with the isolation I find somewhat comforting in a liminal space that makes me want to play a good adaptation of the Backrooms. But it's not just empty office rooms. The game was also full of unexpected surprises, from playable lucid dreams to literally walking into untextured test areas, and hopping into locations from other games to being stuck on an infinite elevator. There was never a dull moment. And I was never expecting the game to have an entire deconstruction and parody of the idea of following up a perfect game with a sequel. I think The Stanley Parable is another one of those perfect games that can only ever be iterated upon with bonus side content or better graphics, and it's amazing how self-aware this game is in regards to that. While I have gotten all my kicks out of the game, I will never forget my time with it. I do consider this one of the best interactive pieces of art ever. Best Horror Game: Doki Doki Literature Club. Plus, this is a game that was always a bit of a curiosity to me. All I really knew is that this game was a horror game in disguise, so the Nintendo Switch version had been on my wish list for the longest time. With a little nudge from my community, I finally picked it up. Now, I do not play many visual novels, my prior experience only being the original Ace Attorney trilogy and the murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, and I wouldn't exactly say that I am the target audience for the dating simulator side of this game. And I have never opened a game before to see a splash screen with a trigger warning on it, but I went in with an open mind, and knowing that this game would take a twist didn't spoil my experience here. Actually, I was surprised to be greeted by some very well written character interactions, when I was expecting something a bit more on the nose, as you'll be spending your time with this game getting to know and choosing between 3 girls to befriend. Sayori is the protagonist's longtime friend who gets him to join the book club, where we meet Yuri, Natsuki, and Monika. The main thing that surprised me about interacting with Sayori for the first time is how real she felt. I could immediately pick up that she was trying to tell me something about herself. And all the characters do this too, very subtly hinting at the darker side of themselves. It's a shame really that I am the opposite of this game's main character, because this game comes in 3 flavours. A third of the game is a character study into depression, the darker side of human nature, and the price of being selfish. And another third of the game feels like it was written by a horny teenage boy, as I was expecting from the game. I'll tell you, I am very prudish and I am very socially awkward. You could tell from my reactions to this that I was incredibly embarrassed throughout these parts of the game, but I am fascinated that this is a style of game that other people actually seek out, and that such players played it unironically, not knowing of the horrors to come, not picking up on the subtle hints in the dialogue, and falling for these parody scenes. I find it hilarious that during my live reactions to some of these segments, I had a chat member say, "Geez, you're allowed to get horny at the horny bits." But here's the thing, in the real course of this game's story, I have only known these characters for like 2 or 3 days. This is totally not realistic, and I think for myself to respond uncomfortably is the correct way to respond. Combine that with the antagonist's goal to make the other characters as dislikable as possible, and it makes complete sense to me. But that chatter wasn't wrong, it just depends if you're the target audience for this kind of thing. I could only imagine how much of a shock the game's eventual twist must come to those kind of players. And I am not trying to spoil any of this game's plot for those who haven't experienced this yet, but when the game goes back to serious mode, man, does it feel real. Before I opened the door, I was completely immersed to the point where a member of my community had to check if I was okay, because my performance felt very real. It's a shame that once the twists are revealed, that even the horror that comes after is hard to take seriously. Because the final third of the game becomes surprisingly meta and full of cheap jump scare and glitchy effects that only make my YouTube poop infected brain laugh. However, there are some very noteworthy moments that still manage to shock me. Without spoiling, I'll just say that staying at the school all weekend was a horrific experience, and the moment where it was me being directly addressed rather than the main character nearly got me. The fact that some of the gameplay even involves going into the game's very own files was another subversion that I had never experienced in a game before, which is another thing that makes this game rather unique. The antagonist of this game reminds me of Turbo from Wreck-It Ralph, who also corrupted the games he took over by messing with the in-game files. That might have been a bit too much of a spoiler, so I'll stop myself there, but I understand why this game became the viral sensation that it did, and I'm glad to have experienced the psychological horror of the main game. The version I picked up even has some extra side content that I hear is actually quite wholesome, so maybe one day I'll return to Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. Best new entry in a long-running series, Shadow Generations. This is the only game on this list that actually came out in 2024, and I knew from the very first gameplay footage shown that this game was confidently oozing quality. In an era where a lot of upcoming Sonic games are met with skepticism, I could tell that this was going to be very special, and it was a shoo-in for pre-order. We Sonic fans have been eating well lately, getting a healthy slew of releases like it's the 2000s again, albeit with varying degrees of quality. It should tell you a lot that the last game in the series that I pre-ordered was Sonic Mania, and I'm totally disregarding the Sonic Generations remaster side of the package here. I don't care, I owned it on Steam, nobody was asking for a game that was easily accessible before it was delisted, though I will admit that it's nice to play the original game on Nintendo hardware, finally. because I consider the Shadow Generation side of the package to be totally worth the asking price. It stands on its own as an excellent game, and to me, far outshines the original Sonic Generations as the better game. I don't know if this will be controversial, but I've always considered the original Sonic Gens to be just a good game. Not amazing or top tier, as a lot of other fans would put it, because my entertainment with Sonic Gens goes as far as spending an hour with it every now and then, blasting through the modern Sonic stages mostly, only replaying classic on the odd occasion. I don't like revisiting half of its bosses, and I certainly don't go out my way to replay any of the challenge acts. It's ironically the fan-made mods that carry vanilla Generations for me, and until we live in a world where consoles officially get mod support like PC games, I can't possibly put the retail version of Sonic Generations anywhere near my top 10 Sonic games. However, when it comes to Shadow Generations, I do want to replay all of its content. In fact, I did just that by getting the Nintendo Switch version after finishing it on Steam. And this is the only game in this video where I went out the way to record new footage for, because replaying these levels is an incredible amount of fun. It's a good thing that this game's movement feels more like what we got in Sonic Frontiers, rather than the limited, stiff and awkward movement from Sonic Generations. Now I too have the confidence to fly over open spaces in the level design. The moveset has both been simplified and enhanced. In fact, the base movement and abilities feel more like what we got in Sonic Dream Team, the Apple Arcade exclusive sleeper hit of 2023, and I do enjoy using the other abilities that are unlocked through the course of the game. A lot of them really sell the idea that Shadow is the ultimate life form, though I can't say that about the Doom Surf and Doom Morph abilities. When the other pack-in game shows Sonic can just run on water, Shadow Generations' approach to water is comical, and Doom Morph is very obviously just ripping off Splatoon. But I guess they tie into the narrative well. From the remix music and the other songs that I can play in a level, to the visuals on display, including 120 FPS on PC, and from the cool boss fight encounters to the meaty main levels with plenty to see, all of Shadow Generations is a must play, and it's been a joy trying to 100% this game's playable content. I just have a few small problems with it that I can ultimately look past. Firstly, are the use of non-playable cutscenes used to transition between parts of the main levels. I can appreciate the odd breather opportunity here and there, but some of them I get especially sick of if they appear in a challenging section of the level, and I find myself getting annoyed having to sit through it again. Funny thing is, some of these sections do have QuickTime events associated with them, but these QuickTime events are laughably easy, only requiring the player to mash one button when they rarely appear. Secondly, that Movie Shadow DLC was incredibly disappointing. I wouldn't recommend anybody shell out a $5 for something with less content than Sonic Forces Episode Shadow, a 3-minute level with a 30-second non-skippable, non-playable cutscene that adds to the timer, and a Keanu Reeves performance that sounds so incredibly phoned in, but thankfully, this is just DLC, something optional that doesn't come with the base game. Thirdly, the rest of my issues relate to the story, which thankfully can be skipped. I do like the whole idea that Doom's Eye survived and is trying to awaken Shadow's alien DNA to revive Black Doom, very Metroid Dread, and I do like how this part of the story mostly unfolds during the gameplay. I just don't like everything else. Any cutscenes in the hub world suffer from the same problems that have plagued the rest of the meta era. The characters just stand there and do nothing. My excitement to interact with Gerald and Maria as Shadow for the first time immediately halted when his first line of dialogue is something so painfully obvious that any player with half a brain cell will have already figured that out. Wasted potential. And I really don't like how Ian Flynn does Sonic stories. Nothing but member berries and callbacks to things done by far more talented writers, and characters who do not feel like the same characters from the adventure era. And I don't really like how the head of Sonic Team, Izuka, always forgets about continuity in interviews. He might have something to do with the unnecessary subplot of Sonic Adventure 2's Fake Emerald. I am further confused when I listen to other Sonic fans dissect this plot. Apparently Shadow 05 has been retconned? I really don't know who Shadow is anymore. But like I said, I can either skip or look past everything I don't like about this and still enjoy replaying my personal favourite game of the year. Unexpected banger of the year. Best first-person shooter. Halo Combat Evolved. Last year saw myself trying a number of first-person shooters, a genre of game that I rarely enjoy, at least with a traditional controller. I rarely complete a first-person shooter if it isn't in the Metroid series, and the same rings true for Serious Sam HD, a Doom clone that sends hordes of enemies after the player, too many for my casual ass to handle. I also tried Half-Life, but I also found it to go on for far too long and its old-school difficulty made me give up on it. But not long after playing through Metroid Prime 3 again, I decided to pick up Halo Combat Evolved for my Xbox 360, as I knew it would be appreciated by a certain member of my community. I was nervous that I wouldn't enjoy this either. My previous exposure to the Halo series was trying Halo 4 for a little while and not enjoying it. Add that to the fact that I am not the best at first-person shooters, and I rarely finish them. However, Halo drew me in when I could see all the moments that were obvious inspirations for the developers of Metroid Prime 3, and the game wowed me when I started the game's next mission and saw just how open the environments were. I can see how this would have wowed gamers back on the original Xbox. The art style of the original game too impressed me, with beautiful backgrounds and immersive lighting that sells the idea we are exploring alien ruins. It's also very cool how the player can drive various vehicles throughout the game. Sometimes I wanted to see just how far I could take any vehicle, and other times the vehicles can be utilised to skip over sections of the level. And my surprise when the final mission involves mastery of driving a warthog was a fun way to cap off the adventure. Halo has a lot of cool subversions of gameplay that require the player to play differently. Sometimes stealth is the best way forward. Sometimes you'll have to be tactical and take cover down linear hallways, and the rest of the time it's all about staying on the move from hordes of enemies. I'm thankful that there's an objective marker to help me navigate these huge maps, and thanks to a structured mission format, knowing that I only had 10 to complete was a huge motivation for me to keep on going with this one. Other first-person shooters I have played just seem to go on and it becomes tedious. 10 missions might not sound like a big number, but a first play of some of these missions can be quite meaty in length. It never got tedious or boring or overwhelming though, thanks to the freedom offered to the player through the vehicles and other weapons that one can pick up from enemies. And the fact that I can only carry 2 weapons at a time means I am never overwhelmed with options, having to remember what weapon I have to use for what situation. I never seen the appeal of the Halo series in the past, but after finishing Combat Evolved, I certainly do. I wasn't expecting such an immersive environment in the art design. I didn't expect to like the music, but the way the main theme evolves as the player progresses through the game was hard not to notice and enjoy. I wasn't expecting to want to know more about the lore, but now I know that Master Chief is called John. How anticlimactic. And I wasn't expecting to enjoy the deathmatch mode. And that turned out to be true. I do not enjoy spawning, being instantly killed and then respawning and instantly being killed again. But the game's single player mode can be played cooperatively, and that is as hype as I thought it would be. Running around with your own vehicles and having a helping hand is pretty cool. Thank you to the community member that gifted me the Master Chief collection and ran through the same missions I tried first on the Xbox. I am currently trying Halo 2, and so far I really like what I am seeing. I feel like Halo might have made me a little better at playing first person shooters with a controller, as now I am hopping into Serious Sam 2 matches with my friends and slaying. Best Pokemon spin-off so far: Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Red Rescue Team. I have become quite jaded with the Pokemon series since it came to Switch. I still stand by my statement that Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are the highest quality traditional RPGs on the console. It's honestly embarrassing to see Game Freak's attempts to evolve Pokemon on a console that can run games like Breath of the Wild, Monster Hunter Rise and Metroid Prime Remastered. And I haven't really dipped my toes into any spin-offs other than the sequel to what was always my past favourite. New Pokemon Snap is an incredibly high quality game and worthy follow-up to Pokemon Snap on the N64, but this year my community nudged me to try the first ever Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game. This game would turn out to be my first ever roguelike too. I like how Pokemon's formula has been adapted here. My favourite thing about this game is how it provides me the same feeling as old Monster Hunter games, having to prepare for a mission and survive using what I have brought with me and my own experience and skill. It makes me want to check out games like Hades and Binding of Isaac to see what else I have been missing out on, and this game was seemingly pushing boundaries that would take Game Freak themselves themselves many years to introduce to the series as staples. A Gen 3 Pokemon game that had diagonal walking, for example, and all the charming and detailed sprite animations for many different situations per Pokemon were truly ahead of their time. The soundtrack has a couple of standout tracks that I really enjoy, however, there were more than a few tracks that either annoyed me or made me laugh. The game also has a decent story, that certainly got me feeling emotional. The writing here is all very good, and after spending over 22 hours with the game, I'm surprised that the end of the story and credits rolling was not actually the end either. I will have to return to this game at some point this year because now the game has introduced evolution and a new plot, so I'm excited to try out more. Or should I skip to Explorers of the Sky, as I'm told that that one will make me cry. And those were the most notable games that I played in 2024. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I'm sorry that this video took so long to come out. It was supposed to come out a lot sooner, but it turns out that things in my normal life have changed very much in the course of the last year, and I find myself with less free time than I did before. So I'm just here to announce that I'm gonna be going very quiet. It's been fun making proper YouTube videos over the last year, but during that downtime, there was one constant going through my head, and that was, man, I really love developing my fan games. And that's the biggest thing that I want to do now. I want to return to developing my fan games. I want to get them completed as quickly as possible before things change even more in my personal life. But worry not, I'll still be dropping the odd video now and then. Just smaller scale things, some reactions here and there. And of course, I'm still going to be streaming 3 times a week, every week, so that I can continue to play brand new games that I've never played before and viewer requested games too. And hopefully by this time next year, I'll have dropped another video about all the games that I played in 2025. Because no matter what, I'm still going to continue to love talking about games. Talking about great games. So if you would like the chance to recommend some games to me, drop a comment below, or why don't you consider joining me over on Twitch? Doing so will allow you to join our Discord community, where we play games at least once a week and do other special events like watch-alongs. This was unscripted and I could waffle on for ages, so I'm just going to stop and thank you. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.